90 Day Fiancé star Armando Rubio has endured one of the most frightening chapters of his life after his 13-year-old daughter, Hannah, suffered a sudden and unexplained medical emergency that sent the family scrambling between Mexico and the United States for answers. What began with a frightening phone call quickly became an international medical crisis. Hannah reportedly told her father that she was not feeling well. Armando noticed that part of her face appeared droopy and that she had lost strength on one side of her body. The symptoms were alarming enough that her family immediately sought medical attention. Doctors in Mexico initially evaluated the teenager, but because of the seriousness and unusual nature of her symptoms, the family ultimately made the decision to transfer Hannah to the United States, where she could receive more specialized testing and treatment. The journey became even more painful for Armando when he found himself unable to immediately accompany his daughter. While Hannah was transported to Arizona, Armando remained in Mexico because of immigration complications. His attempts to enter the United States so he could be beside his daughter were initially unsuccessful. For a father watching his child face a potentially life-threatening medical problem, the separation was devastating. Armando eventually broke down publicly while discussing Hannah's condition, telling followers that he missed his daughter and that he did not want to lose her. His emotional update resonated with longtime viewers of the TLC franchise, many of whom had followed his relationship with Kenny Niedermeyer and his role as Hannah's father since his introduction on 90 Day Fiancé, The Other Way. But behind the emotional social media posts was a much larger problem. The family was suddenly facing medical treatment in another country, transportation, accommodation, ongoing testing, rehabilitation, and other unexpected expenses. A GoFundMe organized by a family friend was launched to help with Hannah's medical costs, and supporters responded with significant donations. Reports in the middle of the crisis said the fundraiser had already attracted more than $126,000, with another report later placing the amount above $146,000. The family situation, therefore, became not simply a story about a reality TV personality. It became a story about parents trying to protect their child while navigating a frightening medical mystery, an international border, immigration restrictions, and the financial realities of emergency care. And for Armando, one of the most painful parts was not knowing what was happening to Hannah. The phone call that changed everything. According to Armando's account, Hannah's emergency began unexpectedly. The teenager was at home with family when she told her father that she did not feel well. Armando noticed that something appeared seriously wrong with her face and movement. The symptoms were neurological in nature, including facial drooping and weakness affecting one side of her body. The situation was particularly frightening because Hannah was only 13. Her family could not simply assume that the symptoms would pass. They took her to a doctor where her condition was evaluated. Although some of her vital signs did not immediately point to an obvious explanation, the symptoms raised concerns about a possible problem involving the brain. The family eventually decided that Hannah needed a higher level of medical care. That decision meant moving her across the border. Hannah was transferred from Mexico to Arizona and later taken to Phoenix for additional evaluation. Doctors discovered bleeding in her brain, but the cause remained unclear. TMZ reported that the bleeding appeared to be in the middle of the brain and that it did not initially appear to be actively worsening, which doctors regarded as a positive sign, even as they continued searching for an explanation. For the family, however, the discovery created another question. Why had it happened? And perhaps even more frighteningly, could it happen again? Why Armando could not immediately be with his daughter? One of the most heartbreaking elements of the crisis was Armando's inability to immediately travel with Hannah. Armando lives in Mexico, while Kenny is an American citizen. The couple has been navigating the immigration process surrounding Armando's ability to live in the United States with Kenny. When Hannah needed emergency medical treatment in Arizona, Armando attempted to obtain permission to enter the United States. He reportedly went to the border with documentation from the hospital explaining the seriousness of the situation. According to Armando's account, however, he was turned away. The situation became a major emotional blow. His daughter was being treated in an intensive care setting. Doctors were conducting tests, and he was physically separated from her. Reports said that Armando was still pursuing the lawful spousal visa process at the time. His attorney also publicly appealed to U.S. officials for emergency assistance, asking that the immigration situation be expedited so Armando could reunite with his daughter and husband. The legal and immigration details surrounding individual cases can be complicated, and the family's situation was particularly unusual because it involved a medical emergency involving a child. But emotionally, the issue was much simpler. Armando wanted to see his daughter. He wanted to sit beside her. He wanted to hold her hand. And he could not. I don't want to lose her. As the medical uncertainty continued, Armando shared one of his most emotional updates with followers. He broke down in tears while talking about Hannah. The reality TV star said that he missed his daughter and expressed his fear that he could lose her. For viewers accustomed to seeing Armando and Kenny navigate relationships, family life, and the challenges of 90 Day Fiancé, the rawness of the moment was striking. This was not a storyline manufactured for television. It was a father dealing with a medical emergency involving his child. Armando also thanked the people who had sent messages, prayers, and financial assistance. He acknowledged that the support did not solve the family's medical uncertainty, but it helped them endure the crisis. His gratitude became one of the recurring themes of his updates. Again and again, Armando and Kenny expressed appreciation for people who had supported Hannah. Hannah's brain bleed left doctors searching for answers. One of the most difficult aspects of Hannah's condition was the absence of a clear diagnosis. Doctors discovered blood in her brain. That finding was serious. Yet the family said the medical team still did not have a definitive explanation for why the bleeding occurred. Additional testing was therefore necessary. At one point, Armando reported that an MRI had not provided the answers doctors wanted. The medical team considered more invasive testing to determine what was happening. For a parent, every new test can bring two opposing emotions. There is hope that the test will finally provide an answer. But there is also fear about what the test might reveal. Armando described the possibility of more invasive procedures as frightening, especially when the family was already dealing with the uncertainty surrounding Hannah's condition. Kenny remained physically close to Hannah during much of the initial hospitalization. He provided updates to followers and reassured them that Hannah had come through a procedure successfully. That support was particularly important because Armando was initially unable to be there. Kenny steps into the crisis. Kenny's role during the emergency became another important part of the family's story. The couple's relationship has been one of the more recognizable same-sex partnerships in the 90 Day Fiancé franchise, and viewers had previously watched Kenny move to Mexico to build a life with Armando and become part of Hannah's family. During Hannah's hospitalization, Kenny became the family member physically present at her bedside. He shared updates and helped reassure supporters. At one point, Kenny was reportedly traveling to be with Hannah after cutting short a trip connected to a family funeral. Suddenly, he was dealing with another family emergency. The situation required him to balance the needs of Hannah with the emotional demands of an already difficult period. Yet his focus remained on his stepdaughter. When Hannah later improved, Armando publicly praised Kenny for being there for her. The experience appeared to reinforce something that has been evident throughout their time together. Their family is built around cooperation, even when circumstances become overwhelming. The GoFundMe becomes a lifeline. The family's financial situation quickly became another major part of the story. Emergency medical care is expensive under ordinary circumstances. When that care involves international transportation and treatment in another country, the financial burden can become even more complicated. A GoFundMe campaign was established by a family friend to help with Hannah's medical expenses. The campaign was not presented as a replacement for medical care. Instead, it was intended to reduce some of the financial pressure on Armando, Kenny, and Hannah while the family concentrated on her recovery. Supporters responded quickly. By July 16th, reports said the fundraiser had already exceeded $126,000. Another report the following day said donations had passed $146,000. Those figures demonstrate the level of public sympathy surrounding the family. People who had watched Armando's story on television now found themselves following a very different chapter of his life. Instead of discussing relationships, weddings, or reality TV drama, the updates were about hospital rooms, scans, procedures, and recovery. The fundraiser also became a tangible way for viewers to help. Not everyone could physically travel to Arizona. Not everyone could contact doctors. Not everyone could help with immigration. But people could contribute financially, share the family story, and send messages of encouragement. For the family, that support mattered. A moment of hope. The crisis was not without positive developments. After intensive treatment and testing, Hannah began showing signs of improvement. Reports indicated that her physical symptoms improved significantly. She was eventually released from intensive hospital care and later discharged, allowing her to recover in a home setting in the Phoenix area while remaining under medical supervision. That development was enormously important, but it did not mean the crisis was over. Doctors still did not have a definitive explanation for the original brain bleed. Hannah continued to require medication, monitoring, testing, and rehabilitation. Reports said she experienced lingering symptoms, including vision problems, weakness, and facial changes. The family therefore had to adjust to a new reality. The immediate emergency had eased. The mystery had not. Armando finally reunites with Hannah. After the agonizing separation, Armando was eventually able to enter the United States and reunite with Hannah and Kenny. The reunion was emotional. Video shared by the family showed Armando embracing Kenny outside the hospital in Phoenix. For Armando, simply being physically present with his daughter was a major victory. The family had spent days dealing with uncertainty, and the immigration issue had made the experience even more painful. Now he could finally be beside Hannah. The reunion came after pressure from supporters and efforts by the family's immigration attorney. Armando later expressed gratitude to those who helped bring attention to his situation. He also emphasized the importance of being with his daughter during her recovery. For viewers, the reunion provided a moment of relief after several days of heartbreaking updates. The visa battle takes another turn. The immigration situation then produced another important development. On July 26th, Armando announced that his humanitarian visa had been extended for another 30 days. That meant he could remain in Arizona with Hannah while she continued receiving medical treatment. The extension was especially significant because the family had previously faced the possibility that Armando would have to leave the United States while Hannah remained there for ongoing care. Armando publicly thanked U.S. Customs and Border Protection for reviewing his circumstances and granting the extension. For the family, the additional month meant something simple but enormously valuable. Time together. Time for Armando to be near his daughter. Time for doctors to continue evaluating Hannah. Time for Kenny and Armando to coordinate her recovery. And time for Hannah to heal without having to endure another immediate separation from her father. Then Hannah was back in the emergency room. Just as the family began receiving better news, another frightening development emerged. On July 24th, Kenny revealed that Hannah had been admitted to the emergency room again because some of her physical symptoms had worsened. The teenager reportedly experienced symptoms including headache, weakness, difficulty walking, and unsteadiness. These were symptoms the doctors had told the family to monitor closely. The family responded quickly. Hannah underwent additional tests and scans. Kenny said she remained in good spirits. That detail mattered because it provided at least a small source of reassurance during another frightening moment. The following day, Hannah was released from the hospital again. Armando subsequently described her as feeling better. Doctors had identified some internal swelling, and Hannah received for medication. The family was once again able to continue her recovery outside the hospital while maintaining close observation. For parents, however, a return to the emergency room can change the emotional landscape immediately. A headache is no longer simply a headache. Weakness is no longer something to casually dismiss. Difficulty walking becomes a reason to call doctors. Every symptom becomes a potential warning. That is the reality the family has been living with. The family still does not have all the answers. Perhaps the most frustrating element of Hannah's ordeal is that improvement has not necessarily produced an explanation. The family has received encouraging news about Hannah's recovery, but the original cause of the brain bleed has remained unclear in the public updates. That leaves a difficult balance. The family can celebrate progress without pretending the situation is completely resolved. They can be grateful that Hannah is home while acknowledging that she still needs medical supervision. They can appreciate the generosity of supporters while recognizing that medical expenses and logistical challenges continue. And they can remain hopeful while admitting that uncertainty is frightening. This is not an easy position for any family. It is especially difficult when the patient is a child. Why the story has resonated with 90 Day Fiancé fans. Armando and Kenny's story has always stood out within the 90 Day Fiancé franchise because their relationship has involved more than romance. It has involved family. When Armando and Kenny appeared on 90 Day Fiancé, The Other Way, viewers were introduced to their relationship as they navigated cultural differences, family concerns, and the practical challenges of building a life together. Hannah was a central part of that story. Armando has consistently made clear that being a father is one of the most important parts of his identity. So when Hannah became seriously ill, fans who had watched their family grow felt personally invested. The response was visible through messages, donations, and social media discussions. Many fans expressed relief when Hannah was discharged. Others expressed concern when she returned to the emergency room. And many continued encouraging the family to keep searching for answers. The reaction illustrates one of the unusual consequences of reality television. A person who once appeared on a television screen can become familiar to millions of viewers. When something happens to that person's family, the audience can feel emotionally connected even though they have never met. The financial pressure behind a medical emergency. The phrase financial miracle may sound dramatic, but the financial reality behind Hannah's situation is important. The fundraiser was created specifically because the family faced significant medical expenses. Hannah's treatment involved emergency care, transportation between facilities, specialized testing, and continued treatment. She also needed to remain in Arizona for ongoing medical care and recovery. That created expenses beyond a hospital bill. There were transportation costs. There were accommodation concerns. There were food and everyday living expenses. There were logistical challenges associated with remaining near a hospital. And there was the uncertainty of not knowing how long the family would need to stay. The fundraiser therefore served a broader purpose. It gave supporters a way to reduce the financial pressure while the family focused on Hannah. The generosity was substantial enough that it became part of the public story surrounding the medical emergency. But money could not provide the one thing the family wanted most: an answer. The difference between treatment and a diagnosis. It is important to distinguish between Hannah receiving treatment and doctors identifying the cause of her illness. Those are not necessarily the same thing. Doctors can stabilize a patient without immediately knowing what caused an event. They can monitor bleeding. They can control swelling. They can use medications to reduce risks. They can conduct imaging. They can watch symptoms. They can recommend rehabilitation. But the underlying cause may still require additional investigation. That appears to be part of what Hannah's family has experienced. The good news is that Hannah showed improvement. The difficult news is that the family remained uncertain about why the medical emergency happened in the first place. That uncertainty is why continued monitoring has been so important. Hannah's recovery is now the priority. The family's updates have gradually shifted from the immediate emergency toward recovery. That does not mean everything is normal. Instead, recovery appears to be a longer process. Reports indicated that Hannah needed to remain in the Phoenix area for further rehabilitation and medical testing. She was also taking medications and undergoing additional scans. The family was watching for symptoms and responding quickly when they returned. This is often what recovery from a serious neurological event can look like. Progress mixed with setbacks, encouraging days mixed with frightening ones. For Hannah, the goal is not simply to leave the hospital. It is to regain strength and function and eventually understand what caused the original emergency. For Armando and Kenny, the goal is to give her the safest environment possible while doctors continue their work. Armando's tears were about more than fear. When Armando cried on camera, it was tempting to view the moment simply as a celebrity breaking down. But his comments revealed something deeper. He was confronting the helplessness that parents often describe when their child is sick. He could not fix the problem himself. He could not immediately travel to his daughter. He could not tell doctors what was causing the bleeding. He could not guarantee what would happen next, and he could not make the fear disappear. What he could do was communicate. He could ask people to pray. He could thank supporters. He could explain what was happening. And he could keep trying to get to Hannah. Eventually, he succeeded. Kenny's presence became crucial. While Armando fought to enter the United States, Kenny remained close to Hannah. That meant carrying the emotional weight of being the adult physically present with the hospitalized child while his husband was stuck across the border. It was an enormous responsibility. Kenny also became a bridge between Hannah and Armando. He could tell Armando what doctors were saying. He could provide updates. He could reassure him when procedures went well. And he could tell supporters how Hannah was doing. When Armando finally arrived, the family was together again. That moment was important not only emotionally, but practically. Both parents could now participate in Hannah's care. The role of supporters. The public response has been remarkable. Fans donated. They shared updates. They sent messages. They offered prayers. Some supporters followed every development and discussed the situation online. For the family, that collective attention appears to have provided emotional support during an incredibly difficult period. Armando repeatedly thanked followers for standing with them. The fundraiser demonstrated another aspect of fan support. Instead of simply watching from a distance, viewers were able to contribute directly to the family's immediate financial needs. That does not mean money solved Hannah's medical crisis. It did not. But it could help reduce some of the pressure surrounding the crisis. And in an emergency, reducing even one burden can matter. A family living between two countries. The geographic dimension of the story is impossible to ignore. Armando's family normally lives in Mexico. Hannah needed specialized treatment in Arizona. Kenny had connections and family responsibilities in the United States. Armando's immigration situation complicated his ability to move freely between the two countries. Suddenly, the family had to coordinate medical care across an international border. That means decisions that might normally take minutes can become much more complicated. Where should Hannah receive treatment? How can family members travel? Where will they stay? How long will they need to remain in Arizona? What immigration documentation is required? What happens if the medical situation lasts longer than the authorized stay? Those questions were layered on top of the primary concern, Hannah's health. The visa extension offers breathing room. Armando's 30-day humanitarian visa extension was therefore more than an immigration update. It was a family update. It meant that, at least temporarily, Hannah could continue recovering with her father nearby. That provided stability during a period when stability was desperately needed. The family still faces uncertainty about what comes after that period, but the extension bought valuable time. And time has become one of the most important things in Hannah's recovery. Hannah's return to the ER shows why monitoring matters. The July 24th emergency room visit also demonstrated why the family cannot simply assume that improvement means the danger has completely passed. Hannah had previously been discharged. Then symptoms returned. The family recognized the warning signs and sought medical attention. Testing followed. She was eventually released again. That cycle can be emotionally exhausting. A hospital discharge is supposed to be a moment of relief. A subsequent emergency room visit can bring all the fear rushing back. For Armando and Kenny, every new symptom likely carries additional emotional weight because they know what happened during the original crisis. Still, the family's decision to respond quickly is important. They are following medical guidance and monitoring Hannah closely. The most important update is still Hannah's progress. Despite all of the surrounding drama, the border, the visa, the fundraiser, the hospital transfers, the central story remains Hannah. She has shown signs of improvement. She has been discharged from the hospital. She has continued recovery under supervision. She has returned to the ER when symptoms worsened and was subsequently released again. Those developments provide reasons for cautious optimism. At the same time, the family has continued asking for prayers and support because recovery is not necessarily a straight line. The public should therefore be careful about treating any single update as a definitive conclusion. A discharge does not necessarily mean a patient is completely recovered. A setback does not necessarily mean recovery has failed. Medical conditions can evolve. Doctors can discover new information. And families can receive different answers as testing continues. Why the family story is bigger than reality television. There is a temptation